Next on Newsmax Prime, a federal appeals court says no to Obama's amnesty. Dick Morris has more on that decision and what may follow. Then more fallout from Ash Carter's comments concerning the Iraqi army. Derek Harvey disputes the assessment of the defense secretary. Plus, Professor Robert Reveal on the sectarian strife that complicates the fight against ISIS. Newsmax Prime for Tuesday, May 26th starts right now. Good evening and welcome into Newsmax Prime. I'm J.D. Hayworth. Of prime interest tonight, a federal appeals court deals another blow to President Obama's amnesty plans. Miranda Kahn has more from our newsroom. Miranda?
J.D., the U.S. Court of Appeals in New Orleans issued the ruling saying that the president's executive orders must not be implemented until the state lawsuits are all settled.
There are actions I have the legal authority to take as president, the same kinds of actions taken by Democratic and Republican presidents before me, that will help make our immigration system more fair and more just.
And that was President Obama back in November of 2014 saying in a speech that caused immediate outrage that 5 million undocumented immigrants will be allowed to remain in the country. The hot button issue has drawn heated opposition from many members of Congress, as well as many 2016 potential presidential contenders. And their 2-to-1 ruling, the appeals court ruled that the federal government wasn't likely to win the appeal. The court also refused to lift a federal judge's injunction, banning the implementation before all litigation is resolved. And Texas Governor Greg Abbott, who filed the challenge, and the Obama administration have both vowed to take this fight all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court, which may extend the court battle right into 2016. J.D.?
Thanks, Miranda. For more on this, let's bring in Dick Morris, political analyst and author of the book Power Grab, Obama's Dangerous Plan for a One-Party Nation. Dick joins us tonight from Philadelphia. Dick, we appreciate your time. Your take on this ruling from the Fifth Circuit.
Well, Abbott, the Texas governor, formerly Attorney General, was brilliant in the way he brought this ruling because he brought it in probably the only circuit court in the country, circuit is right below the Supreme Court, that would rule against the president because it's filled with conservative Democrats and Republicans. So the lower court ruled against Obama. Now the circuit court 3-judge panel has ruled against him, and if it goes to en banc, they'll rule against him too. So it bypasses all the liberal circuits. But then it goes to the Supreme Court, which has a 5-4 conservative majority on it. So I think Obama's amnesty is in serious trouble. And of course it should be. It's totally illegal.
Well, that is true, obviously, at least from my vantage point as well, Dick. But what we have heard is that the Department of Homeland Security and the Department of Justice basically ignored the initial ruling. And even now with this appeal, do you expect those two government departments to continue to ignore the court ruling and move to process illegals?
Well, yes and no. The court ruling essentially said you have to proceed with deportations. You can't simply grant them amnesty by not deporting. Now, the departments, the agencies probably will not start deportations. They'll probably say, we're just going to wait and see how this litigation all unfolds. Had it been the other way, and they ordered them to start deportations, that would be a different story. But it's hard to tell a federal agency to go ahead and do something when it is otherwise inclined not to. But I think that's just minor. I think that the Supreme Court will get this case, and I think it will decide for the plaintiffs. We have to remember there are two elements to this. One is Obama's saying, I'm not going to deport these people because it's my judgment to create a priority for deportation, and I want to give these people the last priority so they're not going to be thrown out of the country as a practical matter. That he has some argument in his favor, because in the past presidents have said, I want to deport illegal criminal aliens first, but nobody's ever put anybody last in deportation, but he has a little bit of a case. The other is to give them green cards, to give them documented status, particularly those who are subject to the DREAM Act or would have been. And that, I think, clearly exceeds executive authority because only the Congress can set immigration law and create an avenue of access to green cards. So I think Obama's going to lose this one. I think he's going to lose Obamacare in the King versus Burwell. And I think a year from now, we're going to be saying Barack Obama's agenda has been obliterated by the Supreme Court because it was illegal all along.
And yet you raised the red flag about a month ago concerning the Trans-Pacific Partnership deal, that trade act. You talked about an end run around Congress on immigration, but I understand in a new column you're saying that the TPP is an end run on some other issues as well. Could you fill us in on that?
Yeah, the TPP is supposed to be a trade agreement, but it's not. It's got nothing to do with trade. 3/4, 75% of the $723 billion we export to the 12 countries covered by this agreement, 75% of it is to Canada and Mexico, who are already covered by NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement. So it's only 25% of the exports that are involved. And most of those are subject to the World Trade Organization that limits tariffs to 3% anyway. This has nothing to do with trade. It's using the word free trade because it's a good slogan to get Republican support. But what it really is a bill to empower litigants and plaintiffs throughout the world to sue the U.S. government and sue state and local governments to eliminate any of their restrictions on imports. Does the Department of Agriculture consider that hoof and mouth disease is prevalent in Chile and we shouldn't be able to get their beef? Under this, they could sue and overturn that. Does some states say you can't use genetically modified crops without labeling them? You could sue and get that overturned. Does the United States limit immigration from Mexico? Under the free flow of labor clause in the agreement, you could sue and get that overturned. This is a vehicle to transform power from the states and the federal government to the international global bureaucracy under the guise of enforcing trade rules. In fact, when the United States recently threatened to crack down on Chinese currency manipulation, the IMF said you can't do that because your cracking down is in effect a trade barrier.
Which leads me to this question. It looks like the Republican Senate was all in for this deal. Do you expect the House to stop it?
I think they might well. There are 40 brave Republican conservatives out there now, and the Republican strategy has been to pass this in the dead of night. But I think that just as the Republican base has stood up and protested against the immigration legislation that various presidents have tried to foist on us, I think they're getting the point that TPP is outrageous to give this president, with his track record, more power. And I wouldn't be surprised if, as we are talking, people are watching the show, calling their Republican congressman and saying, hey, what gives? And you're going to get some shaky votes in the House.
Well, I certainly share your concerns about TPP. Let's move with the minute and a half that remains to the presidential sweepstakes and specifically Hillary Clinton. You say as the Democratic field expands, she's going to have some problems. You still believe that to be true?
Yeah, I do. I think right now, if you're a pro-choice, pro-gay marriage, pro-gun control Democrat, and you see Hillary being criticized by Trey Gowdy and by various other conservatives, you say, well, you know, yeah, she should have released the emails and she's secretive and all that, but hey, I'm not going to vote for one of those other guys because I'm pro-choice and pro-gun control and all that stuff. But when you start seeing in the debates, which will start in 2 or 3 months, the likes of Jim Webb and Bernie Sanders and Martin O'Malley criticizing and Bernie Sanders criticizing her, Lincoln Chafee, you're going to get a lot of voters who are going to say, well, if they're criticizing her over Benghazi or over the emails or over the Clinton Foundation, maybe I'm going to listen to them. And I think that as those 4 other candidates show themselves to be presidential and acceptable and liberal and attractive to core Democrats, a lot of them are going to say, well, now I feel comfortable in voting against Hillary. And that will create a reinforcing cycle of Democrats saying, see, she's slipping in the polls, we better turn to somebody else because we'll lose if we nominate her. And I think that process will be catalyzed by the debates.
Dick Morris, we thank you for your insights. Dick Morris's book is Power Grab. You can get it by visiting powergrab411.com.